Leader of the opposition, Pritam Singh, and Workers' Party Vice Chair, Faisal Manap, will face probes and possible criminal charges over their testimonies before a parliamentary committee. This after a vote in Parliament following a 5-hour debate on how the Workers' Party handled the lies of its former MP Raeesah Khan. The House also agreed that she should be fined $35,000 for accusing the police of mishandling a rape case. Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong says that Singapore's system could fail if people lose faith in leaders and institutions. And this was how he framed his earlier speech, which covered themes of honesty, integrity, and the importance of upholding Singaporeans' trust in the democratic system. Gwyneth Teo with more.
MPs must be people with integrity at their core, who speak and act in an upright manner, always putting duty before self and country before party. And our highest duty, our ultimate loyalty, is not to our party, but to Singapore.
These words early on in the Prime Minister's speech laid out why it's crucial for members of Parliament to take issues of dishonesty seriously. And he pointed out that democracy also relies on the people and voters demanding these same norms and holding those in power accountable. Trust was a key theme in the speech, with the word used more than 30 times in 45 minutes. Raising examples from other countries, PM Lee pointed out how the United Kingdom Parliament is currently going through a scandal over a government that failed to follow its own COVID-19 rules. And a lack of trust in the United States political system means many people have refused to follow COVID-19 protocols that can keep them safe, such as mask wearing and vaccination. PM Lee says Singapore is inherently no more or less special than such countries, and that while people currently have high trust in the government, this is by no means a guarantee.
It is incumbent on all of us, each succeeding generation, to protect and build upon this system that we have inherited. And this requires us to uphold integrity, enforce rules and standards, apply the same rules equally to everyone, make sure nobody is above the law. If we can do that consistently, persistently, unflinchingly, then we have a shot at making things work. People can trust our leaders, our systems, and our institutions. Our democracy can mature, deepen, and grow more resilient as both the governed and the governing embrace and express the right norms and values. Singapore can continue to flourish. But if we allow ourselves to slacken, loosen standards here just a bit, overlook a lie there just this time, the virtuous cycle will stutter and start to fail.
He called the possibility that Workers' Party leaders lied under oath a grave matter and urged MPs to deal with it.
Can we pretend nothing happened? Or if that's too much to stomach, given the strong evidence laid out by the committee, perhaps we lower our standards just a little. Note that untruths were told, but argue that it was, after all, not so serious a lie, and no harm was done. If we do either of these things, we too would become complicit in dishonouring and demeaning Parliament. We must take the transgression seriously and act on it, Minister.
He said that letting flagrant transgressions pass will erode trust in leaders, respect for Parliament, and support for the whole political system.
Workers' Party Chief Pritam Singh said that the Committee of Privileges processes and report leave many questions, gaps and omissions. He also rejected the committee's finding that he had instructed Ms. Raeesah Khan to hide the truth. But Mr. Singh said that he and Workers' Party Vice Chair Faisal Manap are prepared to face probes by public prosecutors, though the party objected to the committee's recommendation. Tan Sahui with this report.
I intend to clear my name and will cooperate fully with the public prosecutor. Singapore's leader of the opposition says this after rejecting findings by the Committee of Privileges. Mr. Pritam Singh says that the committee disregarded evidence submitted by him. He had expected the report to at least include a listing of all documents submitted by the Workers' Party. He says the most egregious of all is the conclusion that in seeking a psychiatric evaluation for Ms. Khan, he had somehow weaponized her condition. Mr. Singh emphasizes that notes submitted to the committee showed that she voluntarily shared to WP's disciplinary panel that she suffered from dissociation.
In my evidence to the COP, I registered the point that the matter was raised because it covered issues of proportionality and culpability. I believe that Ms. Khan should not be excessively punished for a condition she could be labouring under, and the COP ought to see it as a mitigatory point in her favour. This evidence of mine, supported by the COP's minutes of evidence on culpability and proportionality, is ignored by the COP. So I reject this assertion that in raising the matter of Ms. Khan's mental health to a fact-finding body with a view to consider an appropriate punishment, I had somehow smeared her, or worse, somehow cast aspersions on those with mental health conditions.
In explaining why Ms. Khan made uncorroborated claims to the committee, Mr. Singh says it's likely due to post-resignation behaviour. Ms. Khan had resigned from the party and as MP prior to being called up to face the committee. He says this was in line with human behaviour, logic and common sense.
The comparison with Ms. Khan's behaviour and testimony at the COP is apt, because not everyone reacts with loyalty to their party or their party leaders when they realize that the curtain is coming down on them or their political careers. When your departure is precipitated by an overwhelming loss of support from your party members and colleagues, except for your closest allies, from a human behavior standpoint, I can understand why a person would turn against one's party leaders.
Mr. Singh says the WP seeks to improve processes in candidate selection, giving assurance that candidates will be rational and responsible. He adds that he will take full responsibility for wrong selections. Mr. Singh also acknowledged missteps made earlier. He says he should have been more proactive and checked if Ms. Khan had spoken to her family about her sexual assault incident. But he adds that he continues to be sympathetic to those who share personal details and would allow them space to deal with matters.
PAP Whip Janil Puthucheary earlier urged the House to support the motions, even if MPs are not convinced by the Committee of Privileges report or accept that Mr. Pritam Singh has lied. He called for the matter to be dealt with by the courts with neither fear nor favour.
First, we cannot normalise lying by politicians or even worse, reward it. This sorry saga has already eroded trust in our institution, and only a clear and unambiguous resolution will restore trust in the political process. Second, we must consider the impact on the future of our parliamentary democracy. MPs must not think that they can get away with lying, deceiving Parliament and the public. They must come clean, apologise and face the consequences. As a House, we must maintain our standards and our moral imperative to do the right thing now and for the future. And thirdly, Mr. Speaker, the allegation that Mr. Singh planned and executed what sounds like a ruthless deception of his party, the public and Parliament, under oath to the Select Committee, and then possibly threw his own party card as under the bus when they exposed him, it cannot be left to fester unresolved, weakening trust in politics, politicians, and this institution.
The word weaponized came under the spotlight during the debate. Opposition leader Pritam Singh first used it to describe the way the Committee of Privileges report had painted his handling of Raeesah Khan's mental health. It led National Development Minister Desmond Lee to clarify why Mr. Singh had used that term. Mr. Lee noted the word weaponize was in a draft of the report, but later removed after the committee discussed the matter. The committee comprises 7 People's Action Party MPs and 1 Workers' Party MP.
This is important for the integrity of the COP process. The initial draft read as follows. Mr. Singh essentially weaponized unsubstantiated allegations that Ms. Khan was unstable and unreliable, and that she was prone to lying because of her mental health, and this was connected to her being a sexual assault victim, unquote. So that phrase was debated in committee, and we decided to remove it. So Mr. Singh would not have reference to this specific term unless somehow earlier drafts were shared with him. So can he confirm or deny that people told him about the drafts?
That was my characterization of what I saw the COP report was doing, and hence the choice of my usage of the word weaponized. I did not refer in my speech to saying that the report specifically used the word weaponized. I said the most egregious in my mind is the conclusion that in seeking a psychiatric evaluation for Ms. Khan, I had somehow weaponized her condition. I hope that clarifies.
Just to confirm before this House, Mr. Singh was not referring to any drafts or reference to earlier drafts. No, thank you.
Workers' Party Chair Sylvia Lim had raised issues with the findings of the Committee of Privileges. She said her evidence is not inconsistent and not damaging to Mr. Pritam Singh if read in the proper context. Ms. Lim had submitted her handwritten notes on the Workers' Party disciplinary panel meeting. The report had inferred that Mr. Singh gave Ms. Khan a choice to lie.
We see that when Mr. Singh says to her, "Can't lie, right?" Ms. Khan does not contradict him. She says yes, which is an acceptance that she cannot lie. Does this not mean that she understood what he meant all along, that she had to tell the truth? When he put to her that she could not lie, she did not say that she was given a choice.
Well, Ms. Lim also took issue with the composition of committee, where only 1 out of its 8 members come from the opposition Workers' Party. She also raised questions on why the witnesses were questioned by the committee. Ms. Lim pointed out that in 1986, the questioning was done by the law officer of the legal service, which she argued is a better process.
It would enable the committee to sit back and concentrate on evaluating the evidence dispassionately, rather than have committee members actively positing a certain case theory and trying to break witnesses down. If legal representation is allowed, there may be less need for Parliament to make referrals of cases to the public prosecutor. Members of the public have noted the strenuous questioning of Mr. Faisal and Mr. Singh. Mr. Faisal was questioned for about 6 hours in a single day. In Mr. Singh's case, the questioning was done for 9 hours in a single day, which, including waiting time, took 12 hours. While my own questioning was less than 3 hours, I waited for 2 days in a guarded room and was denied the use of any communication devices. When I needed to visit the bathroom, I was accompanied by security.
Wrapping up the debate, Leader of the House, Indrani Rajah, said that the report has highlighted things that members cannot ignore, and the members have to make a decision, and added that referring Mr. Pritam Singh and Mr. Faisal Manap to the public prosecutor is the fairest thing to do. In response to Ms. Sylvia Lim's comments, Ms. Indrani said that the Committee of Privileges had opposition representation. In fact, Mr. Dennis Tan was nominated by Mr. Pritam Singh himself, and such issues were not brought up before when the committee was set up, but only when the outcome is not favourable. Ms. Lim also said that some of the sessions were lengthy. Ms. Indrani added that if witnesses don't give a straight answer, that will lengthen proceedings. Now, as for the lack of legal representation for witnesses, Ms. Indrani said that both Mr. Singh and Ms. Lim are lawyers. Hence, they may not need external counsel.
The speeches did not address the core findings of the Committee of Privileges, which was, why did it take so long to have the truth told to Parliament? I mean, you would think that from the time that it's disclosed to them, the first reaction should be, oh no, this is terrible, we better go back and clarify. But no, this matter dragged on for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. The other is this very puzzling thing about why there was no direct instruction to tell the truth. Because after all this evidence, and this is not disputed, there is no clear instruction from Mr. Singh or anybody else to say, Raeesah, please go back to Parliament and tell them the truth. And why wasn't their own party told about it? How do you have a disciplinary panel that's set up to sit in judgment upon somebody, to judge her for something where, in fact, she has already told you, you know what she has done from months back?
One nominated member of parliament said it's not a foregone conclusion that Workers' Party leaders Pritam Singh and Faisal Manap will be convicted and lose their seats. Mr. Raj Joshua Thomas pointed out previous instances where courts have decided against the government and even in favour of the opposition. And one example is when the Apex Court allowed an appeal in part by the Singapore Democratic Party last year, which challenged a correction order under the fake news legislation.
We can expect that the court will undertake a similarly rigorous examination of the facts and the law in these matters as it does on all matters. In this regard, I trust that all parties will allow the legal process to run its course, from the public prosecutor's consideration of whether an offence is disclosed, to, if it turns out as such, the deliberation and ultimate decision by the court. Parties, whether represented in this House or otherwise, should not cast aspersions on the office of the public prosecutor and on the courts, especially if the ultimate outcome is not one they expected or had hoped for.
A total of 10 MPs, including 3 from the Workers' Party and 2 nominated MPs, spoke during the 5-hour debate on the report by the Committee of Privileges over lies told by former WP MP Raeesah Khan.